Blood painted the white walls of the triage dome in thick arterial arcs. The Grothu child lay still on the meds lab, her 6 limbs splayed limply, bioluminescent veins fading to gray. Medic Velian stared at the readings without blinking organ. Failure, neurotoxins, oxygenation drop-in past recovery threshold. It was over. He pressed 2 fingers to his neck and calmly said, "Time of death, 8:44. His voice held no tremor. No urgency. Protocol over emotion, always. The nurses moved like well-oiled extensions of the ship's sterile will, sealing the corpse, logging vital data, sanitizing the slab. Velilin turned away before they were done. There was no point lingering. The child's end was unfortunate, but within predicted variance. There would be others. Still, something gnawed at the edge of his thoughts, something faint. A static buzz in the back of his skull. It wasn't the first time this week, not the 5th. He couldn't name it, not yet. Only that each time he walked away from a declared death, it felt less like medical discipline and more like surrender. He returned to his station aboard the Harbinger of Peace, the flagship medical vessel of the Galactic Concorde. Towering above the orbit of the war-torn planet below, it was a marvel of interstellar cooperation. 30 species, hundreds of protocols, trillions of credits worth of sterile perfection. And yet, despite its endless resources, bodies kept arriving faster than they could be healed. The humans had arrived 2 standard weeks ago. Late, as usual. Small in number. Unassuming. Veli had barely acknowledged their presence, just another primitive species elevated into space by sheer stubbornness and the Concorde's generosity. Crude tech, loud manners, inefficient metabolic systems. Yet, rumors began to spread. Whispers carried in nurse barracks and officer lounges. Human medics working miracles on the surface. Patients brought in after being declared beyond help breathing again. Talking again. Walking again. Of course, Velilan dismissed the stories. Warzone exaggerations. Trauma-induced hallucinations. No one reversed neural decay or jump-started a stopped heart after 10 minutes. No one returned from multi-organ death. And then came the transmission. It was a Grothu child. Another one. Lungs collapsed, neural cascade failure. The Concorde triage dome had declared the case a loss. A human medical team, without permission, without jurisdiction, took the body anyway. Dragged it into a temporary structure made of plastic walls and chaos. Velilin had watched the footage. They cut the child open while shouting at each other. Used strange tools, crude, jagged, brutal. Blood everywhere. No auto-sanitizers, no robotic assists. A woman, human, female, field rank unknown had her. Entire arm inside the child's torso at one point, yelling for a genetic patch kit and a charged stim at 200%. The child screamed at the end of the footage. Velilin froze that final frame. He stared at it for a full hour. The child was breathing, alive, alert. Crying. Official records flagged the footage for violation of 10 Concorde protocols and 12 subclauses. The human medic was reprimanded. She sent back a single reply, embedded in the data report. "You can quote doctrine all day. I'll be over here saving lives." Now Velilin stood at the ramp of a surface transport shuttle, looking down at the jagged planet below. Dust storms racked the war-torn continents. Fires smoldered across the horizon. Somewhere in the chaos, the human team operated their unauthorized triage camp. He had volunteered to observe. He told himself it was to file a report, to assess how much damage these humans were doing with their reckless, emotional interventions. But he couldn't deny the pulse in his throat, the quiet tremble in his fingers. What he had seen, what the others whispered about, it defied more than policy. It defied reason. The drop took 6 minutes. Upon touchdown, heat rippled through the hull. The air was thick with acrid smoke and ionized blood. Velilin stepped onto the scorched soil. his sterilized boots crunching down on melted polymer and bone fragments. The human camp was a series of mismatched tents and prefabs. Wrapped in hazard tape, alarms blared. Cries echoed across the compound. A nurse ran past him yelling something in a language he didn't know. "Medic Reyes," someone shouted. "We're losing him." Velalin followed the noise. He found her Ava Reyes elbow-deep in an auxiliary soldier with a punctured lung and collapsed trachea. She was swearing under her breath, a tone of music and murder. Her hands moved faster than any precision bot he'd ever seen. "Who the hell are you?" She barked without looking up. "I am Medic Velalin, Concord Observer." "Great. Grab that tube and hold it steady." "No, not there. And keep pressure, or he's going to die." Velalin moved before he thought. He held the tube. He watched the readings climb from red to yellow to impossibly green. The auxiliary coughed, then gasped, then spoke. It was not protocol. It was not clean. It was not Concord medicine. It was something far more dangerous. Hope. Smoke hung thick over the horizon, tinged with the sharp sting of disinfectant and ozone. Velalin stood just outside the human trauma tent, his skin filters working overtime to block out the worst of the air. Inside, groans, shouts, and the hum of unfamiliar machines created a chaotic orchestra. It was nothing like the polished quiet of a Concord medbay. He'd been at the human camp for only 2 planetary cycles, but already something inside him was shifting. These humans, these undisciplined, emotionally erratic creatures, were saving more lives than the Concord's entire surface fleet, and they were doing it with madness. He watched Reyes again, the human field commander and lead medic. She moved like a storm, hair matted with blood, face smeared with dust and determination. Her team never stopped. Sleep came in snatches, meals were replaced with stimulants, and triage decisions were shouted across tents, sometimes with laughter, sometimes with tears. Velalin had tried to keep a professional distance, but the patients kept surviving. Patients with injuries that should have been terminal. Grothu with half their chest missing. Thaun warriors whose neural cores had been fried by shock mines. Even a shattered Tarakian 3 of his hearts ruptured, spinal cluster cleaved in. Yet Reyes brought him back. They all came back. "Doc!" Someone yelled behind him. A human youth with a shaved head sprinted across the camp, his arms coated in slick crimson. "We got another. Thresher strike, level 4 trauma, 2. Clicks east." Reyes didn't pause. "Jake, you take triage. Val, grab the plasma net. Velalin with me." He blinked. "Me? You've been watching. Time to do something." They mounted a medical skimmer and shot across the battlefield, dust flaring behind them. Velalin clutched the rail as they swerved past smoking wreckage and twisted metal. The air here stank of death and melted armor. They reached the injured soldier just as a second thresher exploded nearby, sending shockwaves through the ground. The patient, a slender Elvari male, had lost most of his lower body. Standard Concord procedure would have called time of death the moment his vital signs dropped beneath recovery range. But Reyes didn't even flinch. She slid next to him, opened a medkit, and started clamping off arteries with lightning speed. "Still got eye movement." "Brain's intact," she muttered. "We can work with this. His spinal channel is severed." "He won't walk again," Velalin said. "Maybe, doesn't mean he has to die." She connected a stim array to the Elvari's temples and initiated a neurofreeze protocol Velalin had never seen. The patient stabilized, barely, long enough to be airlifted back to camp. They didn't save him. Not completely, but he woke up later that cycle, eyes fluttering, lips moving weakly. The other aliens in the recovery bay began whispering. "They don't give up." Agrothu murmured. "They don't let us give up." Someone else added. Velalin began noticing smaller details after that. The way human medics sat with the dying, even when there was no hope left. The way they spoke to unconscious patients, as if willing them back. The way they celebrated every survival like a divine victory. They touched their patients constantly, hands on shoulders, fingertips on foreheads. It was inefficient, technically, but it meant something, and more strange things kept happening. A soldier coded out completely flatline, brain death. Human techs didn't mark the body for disposal. Instead, they placed him in a strange black pod called a reboot chamber, muttering about cold core regeneration and shotgun brain sync. Hours later, he emerged with motor function and partial memory intact. That should have been impossible. Velilin checked the Concord medical texts. None mentioned these techniques. None allowed them. He brought it up that night with Reyes, as they shared rehydrated rations under the glow of portable lamps. You're not just reckless. You single quotes beyond sanctioned science. She wiped grease from her face with a rag. Is that your official report? You used forbidden neurostims, off-grid plasmagraphs. That podet doesn't even have a license stamp. Good thing. Hope doesn't need one. He stared at her. Why? She looked him in the eye. Because I've been that guy on the table. Spinal crack, collapsed lung, 40% blood loss. Concord wrote me off. Sighed I was too far gone. Human med team pulled me out, so now I pay it forward. Velilin didn't respond. He couldn't. That night, he walked alone past the recovery tents. The moans had lessened. The vital signs on the external monitors flickered stable blue. Further out, beyond the human camp, the other Concord med centers remained. Silent. Their data logs were clean, precise, empty. Valet. LAN accessed one from Orbit Triage Dome K22. Over 300 critical patients. 52 declared unrecoverable. In the last cycle, no survivors past threshold. No recorded anomalies. Efficient. Predictable. Dead. Meanwhile, the humans had a found soldier walking again. He'd been declared brain dead yesterday. LAN stared at both reports side by side. He looked down at his hands, then back at the human camp. And for the first time in his long medical career, he wondered if the Concord had it wrong. Something deep was shifting. Not in policy, not in procedure. In faith. And somewhere in the dust-choked dark, a realization whispered. The humans weren't just healing bodies. They were infecting the galaxy. With belief. The quake hit just before dawn. Velilin was mid-scan, analyzing Agrothu infants' regrown neural pathways when the ground beneath the camp lurched violently. Tents collapsed like dying insects. Equipment flew, and screams echoed into the cold morning. The quake wasn't natural. Everyone knew that. The Threshers had seismic weapons. The humans called them cracksticks. Velilin had read about them in the briefings, but nothing had prepared him for the sound. The low, bass-heavy roar of the planet itself crying out. By the time he stumbled outside, smoke was rising over the western ridge. 2 tents were flattened. A field generator sparked madly from a half-buried crater, and through the chaos, Reyes stood shouting orders, half her uniform torn, hair streaked with dust and blood. Power grids gone, generators toast. A tech screamed, "We've got 12 patients with open chests and no backup oxygen." Another shouted, "A Concord response team would have evacuated." Triage protocols demanded retreat when infrastructure dropped below minimum operating threshold. Survival percentages would be calculated. Most patients would be marked unsalvageable, but the humans didn't retreat. Reyes kicked over a storage crate and grabbed a toolkit. "We're staying. We build a new grid. Use the backup cores from the drone units." Velilin blinked. Those are not certified for life support. They will be. In 10 minutes. You're risking a catastrophic systems failure. Reyes didn't stop moving. Then I guess we better not fail. She turned to one of her medics. "Jaden, grab the black case." Jaden hesitated. "That case?" Reyes just nodded. Velilyn watched as the tech unlocked a sealed container with 6 biometric locks. Inside sat something small, round, and quietly humming, a black orb the size of a melon, laced with red veins of light. "What is that?" Velilyn asked, voice low. Jaden smirked. "You ever hear of a DORM?" "No." Reyes tossed the orb to him. He barely caught it. It was heavier than it looked. DORM, she said, stands for Distributed Overload Resource Matrix, Human Military Tech. It's a micro-AI core with variable adaptation logic. Think of it like an angry little god who hates downtime. Velilyn stared at her. "You're deploying forbidden AI in a medical zone. That violates 17 Concord statutes, yeah," she said, cracking her neck. "Good thing we're not Concord." With shocking speed, they wired the orb to a shattered power rig. The lights in the recovery tent flickered once, then flared brighter than before. Every diagnostic screen came online. Oxygen lines hissed back to life. Artificial hearts beat again. The patients lived. All of them. Velilyn stepped back, his thoughts in freefall. This wasn't possible. No Concord ship would risk integrating a learning AI into a trauma center. The risk of instability, of rebellion was unthinkable, but Reyes and her team didn't hesitate. They trusted this tech. Not because it was safe, but because they had tested it in hell. Velilyn realized something else then, something deeper, darker, and far more dangerous. Humans weren't working with outdated tools. They were using forbidden tools. Banned weapons, black site technology, AI networks Concord had deemed too unstable. They hadn't just innovated, they'd kept secrets. "How much of your tech violates Concord law?" he asked Reyes later, when the camp had stabilized and the groaning of patients gave way to sleep. She looked him dead in the eyes. "Most of it." "Why?" "Because Concord law was written for peace. We operate in war." Velilyn felt a chill ripple across his spines. "You realize this makes you criminals?" Reyes shrugged. "Maybe. Or maybe we're the reason your patients are still breathing." He had no answer for that. That night, as Velilyn lay awake, on a field cot beneath a patchwork tarp, he accessed Concord Command's secure archives. He requested emergency access to records on human combat med-tech history. He expected redactions. What he got was silence. Access denied. Across the board. Even with his clearance, Velilyn couldn't pierce the wall of obfuscation surrounding humanity's medical evolution. Only vague citations remained, references to old wars, deep earth conflicts, black budget recoveries, Operation Lazarus, the Rapture Protocol, the Threshold Project. All scrubbed, all classified. Why? The pieces slid into place. The humans had seen things, done things. They had pushed medicine beyond the clean, clinical boundaries the rest of the galaxy obeyed. They had built tools out of desperation, not theory. Their miracles were not born from approval, but from necessity. They had walked into hell and taken notes. Velena understood the implications. The Concord hadn't overlooked human medical innovation. They had feared it, because if the other species saw what humans could do, what they were willing to do, every existing protocol would collapse. Every ethical framework would be questioned. The idea of acceptable loss would die screaming, and worst of all, it was working. Velilyn closed the report and stared into the darkness. This wasn't just medicine anymore. It was a revolution, and the humans weren't asking permission. By the third week, the Concord had taken notice. Velilyn stood rigid inside. A newly arrived high-altitude command overseer vessel, a gleaming tower of silver and glass in low orbit above the battle-scorched surface. The chamber reeked of antiseptic and quiet judgment. The overseeing delegate, a Cathari high matron named Cerevus, had just reviewed the human camp's latest survival reports. 72% recovery rate in red-tier trauma cases, she said, voice like sand through a filter. That is statistically impossible without data fabrication. Velilyn kept his gaze steady. The data is real. She narrowed her 8 obsidian eyes. Then it is dangerous. Protocols exist to preserve equilibrium. We do not revive the dead at the cost of order. I watched them do it. With my own eyes. Then your eyes are compromised. Cerevus turned to the other Concord officials in the room, a panel of delegates, one from each species. They nodded gravely, more concerned with maintaining the rules than questioning their efficacy. The human operation is to be shut down immediately, she declared. Their unauthorized technologies confiscated. Lead medic Reyes and her team will be detained and investigated for violation of medical war codes. Velilyn's jaw clenched. You would rather lose patients than allow unapproved success. Success built on forbidden ground is no triumph, it is contagion. That word stuck with him as he descended back to the planet. Contagion. They didn't just fear human recklessness. They feared spread, influence, the spark that might leap species and ignite doubt in every triage. Sent her across the stars, but it was too late. The spark had already caught. When Velilyn returned to the camp, he found a dozen alien medics they're not Concord assigned. Independent volunteers. Krylax, Dirith, 2 Brask surgeons, and a timid-looking Elvari intern barely out of training. All of them had heard whispers, found footage, intercepted unofficial data streams. They'd seen the results, and they'd come to learn, Reyes greeted them like old friends, dirt-streaked and grinning, hand outstretched without hesitation. No lectures. Just follow orders and save lives, she said, slapping a scalpel into the Brask's claw. First lesson, if the brain's not liquefied, you don't quit. Velilyn watched as the aliens hesitated, then slowly nodded. They bent beside her, trembling but willing, absorbing everything. By nightfall, Reyes had a cross-species crew running parallel trauma shifts, learning how to improvise cooling packs from cargo foam, how to rewire a Terrakian's backup heart, using 2 fusion cells and a drip line. None of it was legal. All of it worked, and that's when the Concord drones arrived. They descended like Judgment Sleek, black, unmarked. Surveillance units. No weapons, not yet, but dozens of them. Blinking red like watchful gods. A voice boomed from the sky. Human Camp Delta 7. Cease operations immediately. Disconnect all unauthorized systems. Prepare for shutdown and surrender. Velilyn turned to Reyes. Her smile didn't flicker. Guess we hit the radar. They'll shut this down, he said. You have no standing. She shrugged, adjusting the plasmagraphs on a Grothu child's leg. Then they better bring more drones, a second voice interrupted. Weaker, but fierce. No, said a Brask surgeon, drawn Valgar, blood on his claws. They will have to shut us down too, others echoed him. A Krylax technician stepped forward. We have patients mid-cycle. We will not abandon them. One by one, the aliens stood beside Reyes. Not with words, with actions. They picked up tools, started new surgeries, ran blood panels, prepped infusion ports. They defied the Concord, not with violence, but with care. The drones hovered uncertainly, watching, recording. VEO. Lan knew what the recordings would show. Alien medics saving lives. Under human guidance. Violating laws, breaking rules. Choosing compassion over conformity. And somewhere in a cold boardroom, orbiting high above, the Concord would see what Velilyn already knew. They were losing control, because this wasn't a human rebellion anymore. It was a movement. That night, Velilyn found Rhea sitting outside the recovery tent, hands covered in dried red and blue blood, her eyes distant. You started something, he said. She didn't look up. I didn't mean to. I just couldn't watch them die. That's why it's spreading. He sat beside her in the dust, looked up at the stars. Concord will fight this. Then we fight harder. Silence settled between them. Not tense, just Heavy. Then Vel said, I've submitted my resignation. She turned, surprised. To the Concord? Yes. Why? He looked back at the camp, the broken lights, the tents stitched from recycled metal, the hum of strange machines, and the pulse of life still flowing through all of it. Because I'm tired of walking away from the dying, just because a protocol told me to. She smiled. Welcome to Earth's style of medicine. He paused. I'd like to go there, to Earth. She stood, extended a hand. Finish this war with us, then I'll take you home. He took her hand. Somewhere the Concord watched in silence. And humanity, still vastly outnumbered, just kept saving lives faster than anyone could stop them. The Concord tried silence first. No broadcasts. No recognition. No reaction. They assumed the movement would starve without oxygen. But then the feeds leaked. Footage from drones, smuggled files, first-hand testimonies shared across black channels, soldier forums, medical syndicates, even into civilian networks, stories of impossible saves, of soldiers who should have died walking again, of alien medics throwing away generations of doctrine to kneel beside, screaming patience and try. The galaxy was watching now. And in that spotlight, the Concord cracked. They struck during the next planetary cycle, swift and sterile. No announcements. No debates. Just black-clad operatives and heavy assault drones descending on human Camp Delta 7. Vel was mid-injection, stabilizing a brass child with 3 shattered limbs. When the sirens howled, he looked up to see Concord boots storm the perimeter. Reyes didn't run. She stepped forward, coat stained with blood and fire, and raised both hands. This is a medical zone. You're violating interspecies conflict clause. She didn't finish. A Concord enforcer slammed her to the ground with a shock baton. The cap exploded, not in fire, but in resistance. The brass medics lunged first, howling, claws out. The Gyrith followed, flanking drones with precision scalpel blades and tool-arm weapons built from converted medkits. The Krylax technician activated a backup frequency jammer, shorting 2 enforcement units on impact. Screams rose. Tables overturned. Alien healers trained in anatomy and mercy now wielded that knowledge to disable rather than kill, but they were damn effective. Vel didn't think. He acted. He used a neural pulse injector as a stun weapon, firing point blank into the side of a drone. Sparks flew. He spun and slammed a fallen 4 rack into the second. Metal cracked. Bodies collided. The cap was chaos. And then it stopped. The sky split open. A shadow fell across the valley, a silhouette too large, too quiet, too human. A Terran carrier-class battleship descended with impossible grace. Black steel glinting, guns stowed but visible. It settled behind the ruins of the camp like a slumbering titan. And the world held its breath. From the belly of the ship emerged a single figure. Human, not military. Dressed in pale blue, with a red cross etched into her shoulder. She moved calmly through the smoke, hands behind her back. She reached the center of the wrecked camp, where Concord forces held Reyes at gunpoint. She stopped and spoke. I am Dr. Miriam's S.A. The name rippled across the Concord like a curse. Vel recognized it instantly. So did the operatives. S.A. the Reclaimer. The Angel of Titan. The woman who'd brought 3 million Frostlung victims back from death, using forbidden tech. The woman who had vanished from Earth 5 years ago and left only silence behind. Until now. She looked at the lead enforcer. You are in violation of Galactic Accord Section 12, Paragraph 16. No such clause exists, the enforcer growled. It does now, she replied. She raised a small, sleek device, a live broadcast node. Fully synced, public. Effective immediately, the Terran Confederation declares all human trauma zones sovereign. Any interference will be treated as an act of war. Vel felt the tremor run through the Concord lines, because that wasn't just a bluff. That was a move. The enforcer backed off, orders hissing in his cums. Within minutes, the drones retreated. The black-clad soldiers dissolved into the smoke. Reyes groaned as Valilin helped her to her feet. "You okay?" he asked. She spat blood. "I've had worse." Then she looked up at Say. "You really came?" Say nodded. "The galaxy's afraid of what you're doing. So I thought I'd come remind them why they should be." That night, the camp burned. Brighter than ever, the Terran ship deployed full trauma bays, atmospheric shields, and support drones equipped with nanite injectors. Medical protocols so advanced they bordered on sorcery tech, the Concord had banned outright. Not because it didn't work, but because it worked too well. Vel. Lan witnessed one of the new drones regrow a Thaln's lung in 12 minutes. He watched Ray sit across from Say and whisper, "They'll come harder next time." "They won't," Say replied, "because we're not alone anymore." She turned a holopad toward them. Across the screen were faces. Dozens of species. Hundreds of signatures. Medical crews from every corner of the galaxy, pledging solidarity. Alien doctors defecting. Entire trauma centers refusing orders. Volunteers en route. Valilin stared at the list. One entry stood out. Concord Trauma Node 3B refused deactivation. Now flying human colors. The unthinkable had happened. A Concord facility had switched sides. And suddenly, it all became clear. The Concord hadn't just miscalculated. They had built their empire on the assumption that rules held stronger than hope. That life was less valuable than order. But humans? Humans didn't just save lives. They infected others with the will to fight for them. The war the Concord started wasn't against rebels. It was against a belief. And that belief had become a flood. The final battle didn't come with sirens. It came with silence. A void in the stars, where nothing should have been, a perfect circle of blackness above the planet's southern pole. No light. No movement, just stillness. Then it opened, like a wound in the fabric of space, and the Concord fleet emerged. No warning. No broadcasts. 3 dread-level suppression ships, 12 orbital enforcement cruisers, and an entire wing of sterilization drones. More than enough to wipe out the Delta 7 camp and sterilize a continent's worth of surface with surgical precision. Weren't coming to negotiate, they were coming to end it, on the ground. The camp was ready. Reyes stood at the makeshift command post, once a supply tent, now fortified with sensor arrays, railguns, and shield nodes cannibalized from 3 different species. Her medical staff had weapons now. They weren't soldiers, but every one of them stood at their post. No one ran. Valilin watched it all in stunned awe. Alien medics adjusting shield calibrations. Brask surgeons loading shock rounds. Gyrith techs syncing targeting software with hand-modified AI drones. This wasn't a rebellion anymore. It was a fortress. Dr. Say stood above them all, calm as ever. "They're coming to erase the idea of us," she said. "So we make sure they never forget." High above, the Concord opened fire. Rods of light hammered down like spears from heaven, tearing through the sky. Kinetic strikes meant to collapse fault lines, obliterate supply lines, and force surrender before the first drone even landed. They hit a decoy valley, a trap. The humans had seen it coming. The dreadnoughts didn't understand why the real camp had gone dark. They'd jammed its signal, flooded the upper atmosphere with static, and yet the humans moved in sync because they weren't relying on traditional comms. They were using biological sync links, short range, encrypted neural pulses embedded into their medical bands. A hybrid of Brask sense signal systems and Terran cortical. Meshtech.untraceable, untouchable. SAE activated the mesh. Every medic, every alien, every patient with a linked band received the same thought. No surrender. Protect the living. Let the stars watch us bleed, and no artifiance. The Concord landed drones in wave after wave. Thousands of them. Black, sleek, silent, They hit like locusts and found hell waiting. The first drone platoon was torn apart by microgravity mines and redirected seismic fields. The second was shredded mid-descent by atmospheric disruptors built from Earth cargo lifters. The third wave made it to the perimeter and was met by a combined wall of firepower and defiance. Alien medics fired with steady hands. Velalan himself fired a pulse rifle, side by side with Rias. "This isn't medicine," he shouted over the roar. Reyes grinned, teeth bared. "It is now." A Brask trauma specialist launched herself at an advancing drone, tore open its core, and stuffed a medpack full of nanite injectors into its reactor. It exploded in a scream of white fire. To the Concorde, this battlefield made no sense. Medics weren't supposed to fight back, but they weren't medics anymore. They were keepers of life, and they were defending every breath, every heartbeat, every hope. Concorde troops landed next to elite sterilization squads, wielding cleansing beams and fire protocols meant to purge biological threats with surgical accuracy. They were overrun by a defensive formation built on triage strategy. The humans used their understanding of battlefield injury patterns to predict where squads would move, how they'd flank, when they'd retreat, and they struck at those fractures like surgeons. Not to kill. To cripple. To remind. One Concorde squad, cornered and overwhelmed, turned their weapons on themselves to avoid capture. The humans tried to save them, and that, above all, broke the Concorde resolve. In orbit, command channels burst with chaos. They're dragging wounded back through fire. They're stabilizing enemies. They're not supposed to do that. But they did. Because to the humans, every life mattered, even the ones trying to end theirs. By the time the Concorde command ships fired their final, desperate orbital strike, a seismic-level annihilation burst, the humans had already moved the camp. They'd split it into 12 mobile medical pods, scattered across the surface, sinking through relays of alien allies. Each pod could treat, defend, and relocate on its own. The fleet's final weapon hit nothing but stone, and then silence, followed by something even worse. Applause. From a dozen worlds, from refugee colonies, from defecting Concorde medics, from civilians watching encrypted streams, from neutral observers who saw not rebellion, but redemption. Every drone downed, every squad disabled, every patient saved, even Concorde soldiers. The final broadcast came from the ground. Dr. Miriam Zay stood on the remains of a ridge, flanked by Riaz and Velena. Behind them, alien medics treated patients in the dirt. The blood, the fire. Her voice was clear, calm, and brutal. "This is not war. This is care with teeth. You brought fire. We brought healing. You tried to erase us. And we multiplied." She looked into the camera. "You cannot stop medicine. You cannot stop hope. And if you come again..." She stepped aside, revealing a Concorde soldier on a stretcher, being stabilized by 2 Brask and a human medic. "We'll save you too." In orbit, the Concorde fleet hesitated, and then they left. They didn't broadcast. They didn't retaliate. They just turned and vanished into the void, because they hadn't just lost a battle. They'd lost the galaxy's belief in them. In Earth, that strange, furious blue world, had won something far greater than a fight. They'd won the right to define what healing truly meant. The stars had gone quiet. In the weeks following the battle, not a single Concorde vessel crossed Terran patrolled space. Not a whisper echoed from their comms. Not even a denial. Just silence, like a god who'd been dethroned and refused to speak its own name. Velling stood on a sun-baked ridge overlooking the rebuilt Delta 7 encampment, though now it was something far greater than a camp. 12 fusion-linked trauma bays. Satellite uplinks restored, drone-assisted triage fields, and alien flags. Dozens of them, flying beside the Red Cross of Earth. It wasn't a battlefield anymore. It was a beacon. Behind him, a Gyrith nurse adjusted a Brask child's breathing mask. A Sorith trauma technician fine-tuned Manit parameters on a Grell's healing spine implant. And Reyes, arms still wrapped in an old sling she refused to replace, moved between pods like she owned the sun itself. Verlaine had never seen her smile so easily. So freely. You could have gone home, he said quietly as she passed him. She stopped, looked at him. So could you. He didn't reply, because the truth was he had gone home. This was it. The medics who had stood against a fleet now worked side by side. Humans and aliens, once divided by ancient rivalries and Concord-fueled mistrust, now stitched wounds together under the same oath. Do no harm, protect the living, fight for hope. The Concord hadn't returned, but their empire was unraveling. More systems refused sterilization mandates. More Concord-aligned trauma centers broke protocol and joined what the galaxy now called the Crimson Veil, the informal, unsanctioned alliance of interspecies medics founded by a battle no one was supposed to survive. The legend was spreading. And Lan had seen what legends could do. He remembered the first time he'd seen a human save a life that should have been lost. The moment he'd thrown down his own insignia. The shuttle ride to Earth, where he'd stared at the stars and asked himself if he could ever be that brave. Now he knew the answer. A come alert blinked on his wristband. He tapped it. Dr. S.A.'s voice came through. Prep for incoming. Shuttle. En route priority case. Concord origin. Velin's pulse tightened. Friendly. Unknown. Proceed with standard emergency protocol. He moved. The trauma bay responded instantly. Reyes and 3 alien medics joined him at the landing pad just as the shuttle burst through the atmosphere. Black. Concord design. Scarred. But it didn't open fire. It limped. It landed hard, smoke pouring from its undercarriage. The hatch hissed open, revealing a single figure, a Concord field medic. Unarmed. Bloodied, carrying a child. Reyes stepped forward, raising a scanner. Identify. The medic fell to his knees. Please, they told me not to come. Said you'd execute defectors. But I saw what you did. I saw it. I couldn't. Valilan stepped forward, took the child from the medic's arms. He scanned her vitals. Brask. Malnourished, radiation exposure, internal hemorrhaging, treatable. Reyes, he said quietly. We can save her. The Concord medic sobbed, clutching his own trembling hands. They lied about everything. Reyes offered him a hand. No one dies alone here. And in that moment, Velalin saw it again, that impossible, infuriating, human thing. The ability to forgive. To take someone who once stood on the other side and offer them, not punishment, but a place to heal. Because Earth had never declared war on the Concord. They had declared independence from despair, and the galaxy had heard them. Later that night, a new broadcast went live. Not from the Concord, not from a capital world, but from the heart of Delta-7. Dr. Say sat before a camera. She didn't dress like a general or a hero. Just a medic in a blood-stained coat. Some of you are still afraid, she said calmly. Some of you think what happened here is a fluke, a miracle. She leaned forward. It's not. It's a choice, one every species can make. To stop treating medicine as a tool of control. To stop letting bureaucracy decide who lives and who dies. Her eyes, tired and fierce, locked on the camera. We're not perfect, but we're here. And we will not stop, not for fear, not for politics, not even for peace, because healing isn't the end of war. She smiled faintly. It's how we win it. The feed cut. And across the galaxy, from refugee moons to quiet trade outposts, beings of every kind watched it. Some cried, some stood up from their beds, some turned off their sterilizers, and some quietly, for the first time, reached for the Red Cross. In the weeks that followed, more shuttles arrived. Broken medics, Concord deserters, civilians from dying worlds. None were turned away. Delta-7 expanded, became Delta-Net, a mobile interstellar network of rapid response trauma units, seated across hundreds of systems. Wherever people bled, humans and their allies arrived, not as conquerors, but as healers. One of the Grell diplomats called it the Human Surge. But the galaxy had a better name, the Second Dawn. And as Velulen stood beneath those stars once more, watching a new patient arrive, he whispered words he'd once never imagined saying, words that still made his heart pound with pride. Humanity. Yeah. Asterisk.